Ceasefire talks are happening in Cairo, but the Israelis haven't sent a delegation. That's because Hamas is refusing to send them a list of the hostages, who's alive and who's dead. That might be a negotiating position by Hamas, or it might be that they really don't know, because Israel has decimated Hamas. It doesn't have proper communications. They really might not know which hostages are held where and which are alive and dead. But at the same time, a member of the Israeli war cabinet, Benny Gantz, is in Washington. Now, he is supposed to be meeting Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, probably around now, and later Kamala Harris, the vice president. But he is there without the approval of his boss, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, because Netanyahu does not want Gantz, who he sees as a political rival, talking to the Americans. He wants to talk to the Americans. But it's a sign also that the Americans, they're really running out of patience with Netanyahu. They see him as intransigent and hardline, and they are sending a message that they would rather deal with Gantz, who they see as more moderate. They regard him as more reasonable. But all of this means that the ceasefire, it looks more distant. And it looks as if the Israeli government is in some kind of disarray. What does that mean on the ground in Gaza City, where they're not getting enough aid, and where without a ceasefire they're not going to get enough aid? Well, it looks like we're going to see more children dying of starvation. For 5 months, neither bombing nor fighting has forced them to leave Gaza City. But now, hunger is driving people south in search of something, anything, to feed their children.
We've reached a stage of hunger like never before. When my daughter wants to eat in the morning, I can't provide her with food or drink. Where am I going to get it? No Arab government is blinking an eye, nor our leadership, nor anyone. They've abandoned us.
People get water from tanks, some of it salty. Israeli bombing has destroyed wells and pipes. They transport it as best they can. Life in Gaza City has become pretty much impossible. The Israel Defense Forces are still fighting Hamas in Gaza, but Israel's closest ally is losing patience after last Thursday's incident in which at least 100 Gazans were killed when Israeli soldiers shot into a crowd trying to grab food from an aid convoy.
The Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings. They must not impose any unnecessary restrictions on the delivery of aid. They must ensure humanitarian personnel, sites, and convoys are not targeted.
Nor has Israel stopped bombing Gaza. Overnight, they struck 2 residences in Rafah. The Americans are calling for an immediate ceasefire, but Hamas has rejected Israel's demand for a list of Israeli hostages. So the killing goes on. As they bury their dead, the people of Gaza are cast into despair.
This is extermination. Shame on them. They need to stop the bloodshed. Why? Why are they killing us? Why don't they tell us, we want to kill you all in one go and throw one bomb and just get it over and done with?
A funeral in the West Bank too, for 16-year-old Mustafa Abu Shalbak, caught up in an Israeli raid on Ramallah today. Used threw stones and Molotov cocktails at Israeli soldiers who responded with live fire. It was the most extensive incursion into the West Bank's administrative capital for many years. The Israelis said this was a counter-terrorism operation in which they apprehended 2 suspects and seized inciting materials spread by Hamas. A ceasefire in Gaza is one thing. A solution to the wider conflict is quite another. This is happening at the same time as another ugly row is brewing between the Israeli government and the UN Relief and Works Agency. That's the UN organization charged with looking after Palestinian refugees. About an hour ago, the Israeli government put out what it claimed were intercepts, which it said proved that 2 UNRWA teachers from Gaza had participated in the killings of October the 7th. Now that happens, as UNRWA has said, that many members of its staff have been detained by the Israelis from Gaza, and that when they were released, they debriefed them and found that, as UNRWA says, they were tortured and there was also what they call sexual exploitation. Now that feeds into a wider problem. We know that the Israeli Defense Force have been arresting people in Gaza. They have been taking people for interrogation to find out where Hamas is, as you might expect. But there are more and more allegations that people have been mistreated in custody. And this is brewing into a terrible argument. And we still don't know how many people are being held and exactly what kind of treatment they're enduring.